Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Let me make sure I'm understanding this correctly. The New York Knicks, one of the premier polished turds in the NBA for the last 25 years, the New York Knicks, who have been the joke of the league for 25 years, this franchise has been a flaming ass fire. You fire Tom Thibodeau, the man responsible for putting out the ass fire and turning this turd into a respectable franchise. Not only did he save the Knicks, Tom Thibodeau did the exact same thing in Chicago. You fire that guy, and you mean to tell me you're potentially replacing him with Dawn Staley? Donnie? Even though I've been watching the NBA for over 30 years, I wanted to double check my memory. Tom Thibodeau has coached almost 1,000 games in the NBA. Dawn Staley has coached 0. As a player, Dawn Staley played for something called the Charlotte Stingers and the Houston Vomits. I know for a fact neither of those teams are in the NBA. Tom Thibodeau has over 15 years of experience. Dawn Staley, 0. And the New York Knicks, the team that plays in the mecca of basketball, they're looking to replace Tommy with Donnie? Those of you who have been following the channel for a while, you've probably heard this story before, but I'm going to share it again. Gather round, kids. It's story time with Uncle KC. 10 years ago, when I was still experiencing the misery of working a corporate 9-to-5 job, I was promoted to operations manager. I was the youngest manager in the company. The old manager, he got fired. They gave me his position, and the first thing I had to do was find someone to take my old job. We were a smaller office with 4 dudes. 2 were former Marines in their late 40s, and the dude in the warehouse was in his early 40s. He ended up becoming one of my good friends. We still talk every week. I went through all the interviews, and I narrowed it down to the final 2 candidates. One candidate was a dude. He was around my age. I was 30 years old at the time. The other candidate was a woman who was probably in her mid to late 40s. She was overly qualified for this position. Hell, she was qualified for my position. She had 2 decades of experience working in the industry, while the dude, he was greener than a booger on a wrestling fan's finger. On paper, this decision was a no-brainer. From my inexperienced 30-year-old perspective, the woman was easily getting this job. Late one afternoon, one of the former Marines who had been working at the company for 20 years, he stopped by my office. Now, he was the sales manager while I managed the operations. He asked about the interviews. He asked who I was going to hire. I told him I'm hiring the woman. He asked why, and I told him about her qualifications, her decades of experience. And he said, KC, you're not looking at the bigger picture here. This is a small office with 4 men. Todd walks around the office spitting tobacco. We've got dudes dropping stinky loads in the toilet, not turning the fan on. We joke around. We're inappropriate. We do things that you can't do in a professional setting in front of a woman. This is an HR nightmare. All it takes is one remark. All it takes is one joke, one argument, one raised voice. For the most part, we all got along, but there have been instances where we're arguing and the aggressiveness, it could be misconstrued as a potential fight. With us all being men, we know there's nothing to it. The argument ends and we all move on. But if you bring a woman in here, the entire dynamic of the office is going to change. We all have to be on our best behavior at all times. If I were you, I'd hire the dude. You can't really hire the lady. Even though I was stubborn when I was younger, This is one piece of advice that I actually listened to. Yesterday afternoon, when I heard the Knicks were interviewing Dawn Staley, this is the first story that came to my mind. How much the locker room dynamics would change, how much the atmosphere would change by bringing a woman into a locker room that is filled with dudes in their 20s and 30s. Make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Link to the second channel is in the description below. Today on the second channel, I'm going to be talking about Ace Bailey being set up for failure. This kid has potentially ruined his NBA career before it even started. The entire draft process was a disaster. Ace Bailey is pretending like his last name is Manning. I don't understand these players who think they can emulate Eli Manning. There is a huge difference between a kid from Chattanooga, Tennessee, who went to Rutgers, and the prince of the royal family in the NFL. Eli Manning can get away with selecting his team. Eli Manning can get away with rejecting teams. Ace Bailey doesn't have that luxury. I'll explain why the kid is getting bad advice, so click the link in the description below, subscribe to the second channel. In terms of women's basketball, Dawn Staley, one of the greatest coaches ever. Pat Summitt, Gino Auriemma, Dawn Staley. When you think of women's basketball, those are the coaches that most people think of. Initially, when I heard that Dawn Staley was being interviewed in New York, I assumed that she was being interviewed by the New York Lesbians. I think they're now calling themselves the New York Equality. Now, that would make sense. Not only is Dawn Staley qualified to coach in the WNBA, she is overly qualified to coach a team like the Equality. Dawnie is a big believer in equality. Ooh, I love equality. Women's basketball is for everyone, even women with beards. Chad Thundercock is always welcome on a team Dawnie is coaching. Of course, equality does have its limits with Dawn Staley. She does not believe in equality on the scoreboard. Dawn Staley doesn't tie. She doesn't want the score to be equal at the end of the game. Dawn Staley wants to win. But the interview in New York, it was not for the equality. Dawn Staley was being interviewed by the New York Knicks, the same New York Knicks that just made the Eastern Conference Finals, the same team that has championship aspirations going into next season, the same team that just fired the head coach who turned the franchise around. To make matters worse, they fired Tom Thibodeau without a plan to replace him. And one of their potential replacements is Dawn Staley. If she was given the job, which is highly unlikely, but if she was, this has disaster written all over it. If this were the Charlotte Hornets or even a prime dump like the New Orleans Pelicans, maybe it would be different. But the Knicks are a team with high expectations. It's NBA Finals or bust. It's the largest media market in the country until Mom Donnie gets elected and there's a mass exodus. But as of right now, New York City is the largest media market in the country. Dawn Staley is used to being in Columbia, South Carolina. She's used to dealing with media from the local CBS affiliate LGBT9. In her press conferences, Dawn Staley, biggest star in the room. She runs the show. That is not going to be the case in New York City. 3 years ago, Dawn Staley discussed the pressure that she would be under if she became the first female coach in the NBA. She told the New York Times, "People would be waiting for me to make a mistake. The expectations on me would be so much greater than it would be for a male coach." Dawn Staley is absolutely right. The pressure would be even higher because she's in New York City with the shadow of Tom Thibodeau, who just went to the Eastern Conference Finals. But what I would be concerned about the most is the locker room dynamics. To my knowledge, Dawn Staley has never coached boys, much less grown men. On paper, it would seem like she is qualified because she's a championship coach in women's basketball. But coaching women and coaching grown men, two different things. Coaching professionals and coaching college players, two different things. The locker room is supposed to be a sanctuary for NBA players, or as Dawn Staley would call it, a safe space. Players say things in the locker room that aren't supposed to leave the locker room. We are talking about dudes who are mostly in their 20s. I know how me and my friends were in our 20s. We were maniacs and we didn't have the benefit of millions of dollars. You don't think NBA players are talking about their sexual proclivities in the locker room? You don't think Zion Williamson is talking about his freak-offs with the boys? Do you think that's going to happen with Dawn Staley in the locker room? But Casey, these are professionals. This is a place of business. Inappropriate behavior will not be tolerated. Huh. Yeah, sure. And look. This isn't just a male thing. When men aren't around, women talk and act differently too. Me and my wife, we were just talking about this the other day. Her sister was over here helping her work around the house. For most of the day, I was out here in my studio. Our kid wasn't home, so it was just her and her sister. As soon as I came in the house for the night, the dynamic changed. Things they were talking about when I wasn't around, no longer being discussed. Put a group of dudes at a table, 4 dudes at a table, record their conversation for an hour. The following hour, add one of the wives to the same table. Watch how fast the dynamic changes. The thing is, I don't think the Knicks are actually serious about hiring Dawn Staley. The serious candidates seem to be Mike Brown or Taylor Jenkins. So why would they leak the news that they were interested in Dawn Staley? Optics. So the NBA could say, we're giving women a chance. If I were Dawn Staley, I wouldn't be interested in this job. Dawn Staley has it made in South Carolina. The Lady Cox are contenders every year, which should be a name for a WNBA team. She only has to deal with national media for a couple of weeks in March. She's established. There's minimal pressure. Why would you exchange all of that for a high-pressure job in the largest media market in the country, where the expectation is NBA Finals or bust? Not to mention the fact you have no experience coaching men and no experience in the NBA. If you're Dawn Staley, this sounds like a lose-lose. Give me your thoughts on this. Is Dawn Staley even qualified to coach in the NBA? Would the locker room dynamics change? Me personally, if I were Dawn Staley, I wouldn't even be interested in this job. What about you? Sound off in the comments below. I'll see you guys later.